statements about this channel is that we're unintimidated and uncompromised, and we're going to call things out for what they are. Right now, it is not very popular to say anything except for parroting whatever the Israeli side says. And as I'm going to show you in this segment here, we actually care a great deal about Israel. We care a great deal about the Jewish citizens and the civilians living in that area, and we want them to succeed. We want them to be able to live in peace. We also want the Palestinians to be able to have a life and a future and a hope as well. But what we're not going to do is turn a blind eye to things that Israel is doing that's actually harming their own interest, which could in turn harm our interest. We're going to call things out for what they are. And right now, there's just no way around it. A lot of the things we're getting out of Tel Aviv right now is propaganda. And we're going to show you a few examples of it. Now, one of the most compelling state spokesman that there is on the Israeli side is a guy named Elon Levy. You've probably seen him on some things before. You're about to see some more of him here. But he says things in a very compassionate way or impassioned way that makes it sound like a lot of the things he's saying are right. And most people are not going to be watching our channel. They're not going to look underneath the surface, and they're not going to understand what he's saying, and they may take him at face value. That would be a mistake. And we're going to tell you why that's not even good for Israel to take this kind of propaganda at face value. Let's start off, first of all, by showing you one of the things he said about international law.
The international law is designed to mitigate the horrors of war. It is designed to make nations fight with one hand tied behind their backs. Absolutely correctly. That is what it should do. It does not force nations to fight with both hands tied behind their backs, and it does not grant immunity to terrorists just because they choose to operate out of protected facilities. On the contrary, international law provides the circumstances in which those protected facilities lose their protections when they are used for terrorist purposes.
See, what he's trying to lay the groundwork for there is that the complete eradication of entire apartment buildings, the complete rubbling of sections of cities. He's trying to say it's actually okay because what we've been doing is following international law, and categorically he's correct in claiming that if an enemy is using a certain facility, then it becomes a legitimate target, even if it may not have been before. I've seen it myself. I've seen it firsthand. I've been trained in it I had 4 combat deployments, and I know the law of warfare very well. I've actually operated underneath it. What he is not telling you, and where he is inaccurate, is also any kind of response has to be applicable to what happened. It's got to be proportional to the threat, and it's got to show a definite military advantage to be able to take it down. What you are seeing here in many of these clips that we've been showing, and some more that we're going to show here in a minute, is that that's not the case. There's entire buildings being leveled. This one here, we're going to show it again in a minute, but this one here, you see, these are just apartment buildings, and you can't claim that, well, there's actually some Hamas people in there, the claim. And so they're eradicating it. They're destroying every building. And there's hundreds of people who now have nowhere to live. And no matter when this thing is over, they're now completely pushed out, and there's no infrastructure here. That's one of the biggest problems with this, is that the international community does see this. And even if you have no idea what the laws of land warfare are, if you see the clip like that, and you just see building after building after building being pummeled, then you can say, wait, that's, even if there were some enemy in there, you go after them, you go find them, you get the people who were there. If there's Hamas fighters there, then you send in your army and you remove the threat. But you don't wipe out the entire section, the entire street where hundreds of people used to live, because obviously that is not proportional to what happened. So that's not following international law. Let's just point blank call that out for what it is. And unfortunately for them, but fortunately, I think for the side of righteousness and truth, even our government has not taken this one completely at face value, and certainly NBC News is not.
Confident Israel is following international law, John? Just yes or no there.
We are confident that it is our position that it needs to. When we have seen issues that are raised based on incidents on the ground, we raise them privately and directly with the government
John,
of Israel.
let me just, you're saying that Israel
play judge and jury on this question.
Yeah, let me just follow up quickly. You said Israel needs to follow international law. Are you confident they are following international law?
What I can say is it is not our position, certainly my position as a policymaker, to play real-time judge and jury on the question of any particular incident. When we see things that concern us, we raise them. We have done that during the course of this conflict. We will continue to do that.
Now, one of the other things that the Israeli spokesman has said is that they're following the laws of war, and in fact, they're being very compassionate because they are giving people advance notice about where the bombs are going to come in, give them a chance to get out of it. And let's see, Gary, if we can throw up that map that they have put out there, which shows a lot of the places that they're going to go. You know, he actually ridiculed those people who say, "Oh, well, you know, there's not a lot of internet there, so a lot of people on the ground can't find this." Well, he says he mocked them and said, "Oh, of course they do. That's how come you get all these images coming out of there." Well, what he's not telling you is that the news services do, because they have satellite phones. They have the ability through generators to continue to get their facilities and their capabilities powered up so that they can get those. They have satellite phones. They have many ways to get it out there. Regular people don't have that because of the massive destruction of the entire civil infrastructure. Where are they going to plug in a phone? There's no plugs in there for a regular person, so they're not going to get that. On top of the fact that you can see that graphic there is not at all self-intuitive. You can't just figure out what it is from there. You see that thing in there, you just see lots of numbers, and especially on the bigger one, there's so many of them, they're just kind of conglomerated into a dark spot, but you don't know what that means. Going into this area or that area, what's safe? How do you get there? None of those things are. So they're not really paying a lot of attention, but in the chances where they have moved, you've seen many times where one person will move from one area to another, and this is what they discover.
Civil defense are trying to listen to the people under the rubble to hear if there's someone under the rubble or not. This house contains 70 persons. There are people from Gaza City evacuated Gaza to here. They call it a safe place, safe zone, but no one is safe.
You see that, yeah, you put that graphic out there, but then you tell people move from one area to another, and they're bombing those areas. And so the people there, and I only showed you a portion of that video because it was just inappropriate to show more, but they continued to show the results of that, and they were very graphic. And these people thought they were escaping from it, and yet the bombs followed them down there. So again, you have to say this is not exactly a compassionate situation where you're looking out for the people when the very areas you tell them to move into later get bombed. That's just the truth of it's going on there. Now, speaking of that, this same spokesman actually also says they're actually being very precise in their targeting.
We saw a lot of international calls to make sure that the IDF is operating with precision. So the IDF is operating with precision and released an interactive map dividing the Gaza Strip into very, very, very tiny, small subsectors so that we can warn the population where the fighting is going to take place. Okay, surrendering the element of surprise. We've given up on the element of surprise, where we can warn the civilians where fighting is going to take place so they can get out and we can target the infrastructure Hamas has built under the civilian infrastructure. And then to see that being mocked or discarded as being dystopian, or people raising questions about how are they supposed to access the maps when there's no internet, even though everyone in the media knows there is internet, because how else are you getting these reports out of Gaza, is upsetting.
Well, of course, and I just told you about that. It's not upsetting if you know that there's no way to get power for a regular person. Yeah, the news media has it, and that's why you're able to get these videos. That's true enough. But the 2 million people there, the 1.8 million of them who are displaced, don't have that capacity. So they don't have the ability to know that, to even know where to go. So that's the first point on that one. You also have to take into consideration. And the second thing, where he's talking about this targeted ability to basically surgical strikes, which I've heard ad nauseum throughout this entire war, inaccurately speaking. Gary, if you can throw that one image back up there again, where we had the apartment buildings that were just getting knocked down one after the other. There's nothing precise in that about this. This is just destroying civil infrastructure, plain and simple, black and white. Now, one of the questions that's never answered, but neither by this official or anybody else so far, and that is, what are they basing their targeting data on? Do they have some sort of actionable intelligence where the citizens or the Israeli Defense Forces can say, yes, we have information here. We know there's a bad guy in here. We're going to go after him. Or is it something else? Now, according to reports issued just in the last couple of days from some leakers in the Israeli side who are, brokenhearted by what some of the things they're seeing and very distraught, is that advanced or AI, automated intelligence, is being used to do a lot of this, where there are almost more targets than they can get. Most of the time, people don't even know what they're shooting at. They don't even know what the targets are. They don't know the algorithms that go to feed them. They just see a target show up on a list and they shoot it and they fire it in there. Now, we don't have any idea whether that's something that's legitimate or not. Nobody knows that. But look, it doesn't take a genius to figure out that it's not like that Hamas is using firing points on every building in this area. All 7 of those you saw. We'll just take that one example. It's not even realistic to suggest that one strip of buildings, all the buildings were being used, so all the buildings should be knocked down. Again, we get back, there's the proportionality. You can't just say, even if it turned out there was true that there's somebody in there, there's people living in there. Yeah, you see on this screen right here. I mean, that's the result of some of these. Entire portions of the city have been leveled allegedly because there was a Hamas person in there. Yet at the same time, we're also told that so far the IDF has caused only minimal damage to the Hamas fighters themselves. Now, how can that be? If these are actually precise targets, as Mr. Levy says, how is it that the Hamas group itself can still be largely intact? I mean, it should be almost eradicated by now if this was really targeted. Now, listen, I can tell you from firsthand experience what I've seen in graphic displayed in combat. When you go after allegedly bad guys and you end up killing innocent people, you create far more enemies than you ever get rid of. I mean, I lost count of the times where we said we went on, quote, targeted strike against a Taliban member in the Afghanistan, and it inadvertently killed some other people in buildings and next to it. I saw some of those in real time in some of our command centers as they went in there. And I saw, we targeted somebody in one building and you see this explosion when it took out parts of like 4 buildings around it. And you knew that people were getting wounded and killed in that. Well, look, what no one pays any attention to is, yeah, you got the guy that you targeted, but now then the 30 family members of the survivors around here are now against you. Now you just put that on steroids. Just imagine with all of these people that are being killed and wounded and made homeless in the Gaza Strip. Do you think that after the war is over, that they're going to want to make peace with Israel? That they're going to say, okay, Hamas is killed, and they're going to take Israel's advice and say, yes, it was not the Israeli bombs that did it, but it was those darn Hamas fighters that put us all in this position. They're not going to think that. That's what we want to happen. It's not going to happen. It's unreasonable. It's illogical. It's irrational to think that's what would happen. They're going to blame the people who actually fired the bombs, who actually shot the guns, who actually sent the drones in to attack. It's just self-evident. I mean, it's just human nature that anyone would blame the person who pulled the trigger, not the guy who set the stage for it, even though they may dislike him. And a great many Palestinians did hate Hamas. But now then, their hatred is turned into the ones pointing the guns and dropping the bombs. I mean, it's self-evident that would be so. Now, the last thing I want to talk about here is what he has claimed here is about some of they're trying to pat themselves on the back about how they got a lot of the hostages back, and they're claiming it's because of how tough they're being.
We clobbered Hamas. We had it begging for a breather. Hamas wanted a few days to catch its breath. And in exchange for giving it time to catch its breath, we received 110 hostages back. Now, I don't know whether, as journalists, as citizens, how optimistic you were at the start of this war that we were going to get nearly all the children, except for the 2 Bibas children Hamas now claims are dead, back home. I can't say safely because the families are revealing horrifying details about the psychological scars of that child abuse that they experienced. But that strategy has proven itself. The option of standing by the sidelines and hoping Hamas would release them or asking them nicely or diplomatic pressure was never going to work without unrelenting military pressure.
Look, you can't just think of one half of the calculation. It's like trying to solve a math problem and saying, I'm just going to take the first part, solve that, and just be done with it and be done. No, you don't get a choice in the matter. If you actually want to solve a problem, you have to do the whole variable. You have to do all the parts of it. So yes, without question, Israel succeeded in getting back 100 hostages. Terrific. We applaud every single one of them that came back. We earnestly hope that every one of the other hostages are also returned. But in claiming that the only thing that made that happen is you're being tough, you see, again, as we just pointed out, Gary, show that one again about with the kids that are running around in the aftermath of some of those bombs. This is what it means when you say you're going to get tough, is that you're creating this kind of carnage. There's been 2/3 of these casualties have been women and children. Now, what do you think about the surviving men? What do you think about the father of kids like that? What are they going to do? Are they going to say, yes, we're just going to cow down and just, hope this gets over soon and then try to live a peaceful life in Gaza again? I mean, you've destroyed their homes. You've destroyed their families. So you can brag on yourself for getting 100 hostages back. But you know what? Here's the real problem. You're creating future difficulties for other Israelis. You're causing ultimately more Israeli defense forces to actually be killed because this war will go on. Benjamin Netanyahu said his objective is to bring peace to Israel. He said he wants to destroy Hamas, who did this horrific attack on the Israeli civilians on 10/7. And by every right, Israel should respond to that. They should take out Hamas. Don't hear me correctly here. I'm not in any way saying that Hamas should not be targeted, that the people who did that heinous act should be brought to justice. They should. Point blank, period. None of the other circumstances matter. Once they took that action right there, they surrendered any justification they may have had. They deserve to be brought to justice, whatever that takes. But, and here's the big but, it has to be done in a way that can have a good ending, that can make peace a possibility to reach right now. What Israel is doing at the moment is building up more trouble for themselves, not peace. Because all of these enemies they're building and the hatred that they're building inside there is making the conditions that existed prior to 10/7 10 times worse, 100 times worse. Even if somehow every Hamas member is eventually killed, something's going to take their place. Some Palestinian group has to operate and just to bring, bureaucratic civilian functioning of this city again. So somebody's going to take over politically and take care of the situation here. What do you think the chances are that whoever takes over that is going to be passive? They're not going to be. They're going to be so angry right now, or at the end of that, far more than they were at the beginning. Again, it's self-evident. And anyone who's looking at this with open eyes would understand that. What Israel should do, there's 4 things I think that Israel should do right now. Instead, they should change course. If they want to have a good outcome, if they want to have peace, they're going to have to do some things differently. And the first thing is, look, they're just going to have to be precise in their targeting is the first thing. It's hard work to do it the right way. It's hard work to actually, for example, that long apartment complex buildings you saw, all 7 of those. It would be much more difficult to actually take out the individual Hamas members and have a military operation to go through and clear those buildings than it was the way they did it. It's easy to just, click a few buttons here and shoot bombs and drop all those buildings. Now you don't have to go in there. So for you, that's easy. But that's not the right thing to do. It's not morally the right thing to do. And even practically, that's terrible because now you've created probably 10 times more people who were against Israel than there were before those bombs were dropped. However many Hamas members may actually have been in there, who knows? But until you're precise and you do the hard work, and that means it's going to take longer, that means there's going to be more IDF casualties, but then you're at least going to have a shot at creating some sort of an infrastructure where those people can live and they have some reason to have hope. If you give a people no reason to have a hope, there's virtually no chance that they're going to be passive or work in ways that are amenable to you. They're just not going to do it. It is unreasonable to expect that they would. The next thing is that they're going to have to work with the Palestinians. They're going to have to do that right now. Because if they wait until this is over to even start, they don't have any chance to actually get help from them. If they go to the Palestinians now, and if you don't want to go to the Palestinian Authority because they're weak, you definitely aren't going to go to Hamas because they're disqualified. But there are people in Palestine right now. There are people in the West Bank right now that you can work with. Find those people and say, hey, what can we do? How can we minimize the harm to your people, to your innocent people who had nothing to do with 10-7 and only want to live in peace? How can we start working to keep them safe? And what can we do to start having a governance afterwards? Don't wait till this is over. Start that right now. Then you got a shot to actually have a sustainable peace on the other side. And look, I'll also point out, it's going to require some ability to compromise on Israel's part. Right now, Israel doesn't want to compromise on anything. They just want to say, here's what we're going to do, and that's the end of it for you. That's never going to work. What you have to do is say, we're going to have to compromise on some things. Not with Hamas. Make sure you're clear on that. Hamas is off the table. They're disqualified. But with the Palestinian people, who were just as much of a victim as the Israeli people who were slaughtered on 10-7 were, they do deserve to be listened to. They do deserve to be in charge of their security, which allegedly Netanyahu actually says that they can do. You need to work with them right now so that you can get buy-in, so that they can actually help you find the bad guys and bring peace to the situation, or at least security and stability, at least in the fighting. That's got to be first, and you can work on peace later. That'll be extraordinarily difficult. But the first thing that they've got to do is end the fighting and end the war. And that can be done, that can be facilitated if Israel's willing to compromise and do some things that the Palestinian people want to do, who are going to live there. And then the last thing we want to talk about today, look, don't just wipe out entire buildings. Don't just destroy entire sections of the city, because whoever you are going to allow to rule afterwards, whatever the Palestinian people are going to do to run the show, they're going to have a city. Because, folks, I'm just here to tell you, Egypt, they're not going to budge. They are not going to open those gates and allow all of these people to move into their country. Jordan's not going to do it. Saudi Arabia is not going to do it. Nobody in the Middle East is going to do this. And there's many reasons why. Many of them are self-interested. They don't want, a lot of them, like Egypt, hates Hamas as much as Israel does practically. And they don't want any of those people escaping into their territory and bringing trouble over there. But they also said, no, that historically the Palestinian people were on that land, and everything from the Oslo Accords, President Biden, even the Israeli governments from time to time all say they want a two-state solution, meaning those people are going to stay there. Now, if there's any chance for that to happen, they've got to have somewhere to live. They've got to have houses. They've got to have apartment buildings. They've got to have water facilities, electricity production companies. They got to have sanitation. They got to have all those things that allow people to exist. And if you just say, we're just going to continue to knock out entire sections of the city because some AI algorithm said there was some enemy in there, then you're creating the conditions that almost can only be leading to more instability for Israel, for the Jews who live there. Because the Palestinian people, if all they're done is reduced to living in tents and hoping that they get enough resupplies to just survive, they're not going to be content, folks. They're going to be looking for any way to get out of there and to strike back at what they feel was taken from them. It's just human nature. So let's be clear on all this. We're not anti-Israel in the least. As a matter of fact, I argue we are more pro-Israel than anyone else, because we want them to succeed. We want them to have peace. But the only way you're going to have peace is if you're willing to get the Palestinian people to a place where they can live and have peace themselves. It's a two-way street. It's a package deal. You can't take one without the other. You can't get Israel for peace for Israel, if you don't get peace for the Palestinian people. I'm sorry. That's just the truth of it. That's the hard reality. I don't care how much you don't want to believe it, don't want to agree with it. If you don't get peace for Palestinian people, you won't get peace for Israel. If you care about Israel, if you care about the Jews and want them to live in peace, this is the path you're going to have to go down. Now, we don't have any power here. I get that. I just hope that somebody will at least, think about this on the Israeli side, because it's the only way to survive. It's the only way to succeed long-term in this region. We thank you for listening. we ask you to keep on watching our show here, because we're going to keep on giving you this unintimidated and uncompromised kind of information here. Like and subscribe, share to your friends, because people need to know the truth. We're looking out for you, and we're going to give it to you no matter what anybody else does. We thank you, and we will see you tomorrow on Daniel Davis Deep Dive.